beat wings of moths across his heart, though no king nor courier goes eyeless through drifts of days, nor current of tongue still anchored in gullet may please his ears, or hold his memory on sweet ears. Thorn has pricked his drums, so he cannot hear the creep of insects, nor the swish of daughters' tails trailing crowns, and the downs at sunset hissing with snakes. Though I would be home, and my dolls in it, he said, seed blowing in the wind. What separates this day and a hearth of familiar servants is only sun subdued by moons. And for folk getting as old as I am, counterpane time. The nightgown of another evening is pulled down tight across us, stifling talk as fires burn up the air and infants cease to bawl. Sky is deep upon us, breath is thick, stilling tongues. Only the cat's purr makes murmur across fire-flickered rooms. But then, often near midnight, an owl flutes across chimneys. Words repeat themselves as old folks forget. They have already said good night. The customary cup collection is taken into tiny kitchens, and old bones creep into chilled nightgowns. Moon slipping across white pillows. And my poem, my first poem, written in 1958 when I was at training college. Gas. At midnight when no flowers bloom, 3 men came riding by. They were, they said, knights to the White Mountains, and tread our way to kingdom come. We through the world's long acres stalked 1,000 mile, over the mockingbird hill to a court of marionettes riding a carousel. To the fiery spangled sky we rode, and asked, "What know you, stars?" "Gas," they whispered.
Thanks very much, Ian. You know, I did try and set you up for something metaphysical right at the start there. I don't know if you remember that. Anyway. Now, Michael, would you say what you would like to, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a hard act to follow. But you'll know this one. But I thought a little background would help for context. At the end of the First World War, 1919, people were deeply shocked at what had taken place. The ally and adversary alike realized that the industrial strength and scale of the human slaughter would take some understanding, and we would call it trauma now, but whole nations were trying to forget and deny the jazz age that followed. It was just a party, really. But one young Irish poet, W.B. Yeats, nailed it pretty well. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely some second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of spiritus mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of desert, a shape with lion body and head of man, a gaze pitiless and blank as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed into nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. And here's a little one, a completely different century, really. When I read, if you remember, Shogun by James Clavell, there's a lot of talk of haiku in it, through it, and right towards the end, there's a haiku for everything, of course, and right towards the end, one of the Shogun's captains, a domo by the name of Yabu, is betrayed and brought before the Shogun. He's been playing both sides. The charges are read and the Shogun says, well, are these true? And Yabu says, no, Lord, and they can't be proven. That's right, they can't be proven, but I can no longer trust you, so slit your belly by noon. Right? He was a samurai, and that's what you do. So he goes through the ritual of cleansing and dressing, and finally kneels on a low stool and gives his death haiku. What are clouds but an excuse for the sky? What is life but an escape from death? And at that point he disembowels, puts a dagger in his heart, and before he can scream, his head is removed from behind. That's dying with dignity. So that's quite memorable, it was. To lighten up, this is Gary Snyder,
Yes.
Black Mountain School.
Great.
After weeks of watching the roof leak, I fixed it tonight by moving a single board. And finally, I walked to work recently, somewhere along the line, in the middle of winter, and there was a deep frost, big frost. It was slightly surreal, very early. I've called this fine spells. If on a morning like this, you followed those footprints there exactly, no one would know you'd crossed this wide white frost here successfully. This is a fine thing. It's likely too you would surprise spur-winged plovers, white boys, on a rising field, huddled in conference with black-backed gulls, bother boys, devising the day's mischief. Boy, they hate that. The morning's roaring traffic would also shield you from distraction, so walk to work in winter on the wide white frost, in the nearly new day, under powder blue sky, alabaster wings, shocked trees, and etc., etc. On a morning like this, these fine spells can last and last.
Thank you, Michael. Oh. Well, you know, I like to thank you, Andrew. I like to finish with a bang, you know, as opposed to the whimper, I suppose. So, you know, this is a bang, and I'd like to ask you to come, Jill, and you know, sing it. But you know, Armistice Day, it's almost the century, and as you said, Michael, hard to imagine now. But the chaos and turmoil, complete overturning of everything at the end of that First World War. Now, the poet Apollinaire, Guillaume Apollinaire, who was a good friend of people like Picasso, now, he died the day after the armistice was signed, not of his war wound, the shrapnel in his head, but of the influenza epidemic that came hard on the armistice and killed many millions around the world. So this song is for this poet called Apollinaire, and it's called To Apollinaire. I'll just play the guitar and you sing. Parasites, yes? To Apollinaire.
Paris evenings filled with gin,
Aflame
with electricity, trams with green dorsal lights
along the sections of their rails. Cafes puffed out with smoke
proclaim the love of gypsies.
There is the sun which turns, there is the earth which turns, there is your face which turns upon the axle of your throat.
Paris evenings filled with gin, aflare with electricity, trams with green dorsal lights upon the sections of the rails, cafes puffed out with smoke proclaim the love of gypsies. There is the sun which turns,
there is the earth which turns, there is your face which turns upon the axle of your throat.
Thank you. I would like to say something. First of all, I kind of have a prerogative, aren't I? Because I'm up here and I've got the mic. I would like to invite our good friend Bob to just do one more, please, Bob.
Yes.
One more. Whatever your favouriteest one is in that book. Because we love you so much and we don't get you down here enough and to hear your poetry. So, would you for me? Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Jill. Thanks for those beautiful words, and thanks everyone being so receptive. And what more can I ask for? Anyone who thought about my name would know that I had Scottish ancestry quite a few generations ago now. But last year I became fascinated by the word gloaming, a Scottish word which refers to that mysterious time between sunset and darkness. And I kind of figured, well, I'd love to be able to write a poem about gloaming, but I feel kind of fake if I was trying to write it in a poem nowadays, because I'm a Kiwi and we just don't use that word. So anyway, it swiveled around the word gloaming. And I've dedicated it to a Scottish poet called Kathleen Jamie, who I urge you to read if you can get any of her books. She's a contemporary Scottish poet, absolutely brilliant.
Can we have the name again?
Kathleen Jamie, Jamie.
Thanks.
Yeah. Gloaming. Word I love, 4 generations too late to use in a poem. In this city, on the rim of the Pacific's blue quadrant, we refer to rush hour, but only until the traffic dwindles. Once there was glide time, but that never really amounted to anything. Thinking sunset but saying dusk is only for those trying to be poetic. In certain bars we might settle for happy hour, but invariably that term makes me melancholic. Last week, while picking over the crumbs of my ancestry, I saw outside my window a cock pheasant so snazzy, strutting his stuff on the road up the hill to waylay a hen, who, feigning indifference in the fading light, walked on by as if to say, "Get a life," but with a sideways glance, beckoning, before both of them vanished into that hour known as daylight saving.
Jill and I have been working away at this little poetry festival, and this is the last event. There are still lots of poems and shops around town, poetry and windows. 10 shops, each have 10 poems, and over 10 days they change a new poem daily. It's a huge project, and Jill works tirelessly at it. Hours. Thank you. Bringing poetry to the town. Another project of Jill's is, which was launched last year, is Poetry on Walls, and we're hoping to, as over the next couple of years, particularly the next 6 months, is to increase the number of local poets' work on walls around town. And there's one out here, thanks to McLeod's and Eddie, the landlord, and Mark Spikerbosch at Council have made this happen. And this year, just on Thursday night, we launched it, and as it's 125 years since of suffrage in New Zealand, and last year's poems were all men, we agreed that it would be great to honour local women poets. And so there are 3 poems on the walls outside, and we do encourage you to look at them. If not tonight, then sometime soon.
And just some thanks that we want to really thank Rotorua Lakes Council, because they do so much support in the city for the arts, and the poetry thing is just growing. The Thursday night there was over 50 people, and people asked if the Clouds could do something. They could talk about doing something regularly. Also, we want to thank all of you, because without an audience, we wouldn't be here. Thank McLeod's. We also want to thank Brian for doing the poetry back in 1981, so that we brought these poets together. Thank you, Ian and Jean, for the trip, which, as you said, is most probably harder to get here than to Melbourne, but I'm glad you chose here over Melbourne. Bob for coming, this wonderful route down to see us from Te Mata. I also want to thank you, Angela, and I want to thank Riley, and you over the back, Max. And I don't know if Matilda's here, because Matilda said, why's Jill Walker here again? Because I've practically lived at their house when I haven't been living at home. Sorry, Brian, I've been at their house 4 times.
We've looked after her.
Yes,
She's
looked
lots
after.
of sausage rolls.
And, I said to Matilda the other night when Angela and I got back really late, and Max had his plate, I said, it's because I can smell your food. I can smell it from down the road. And I went over and got your plate, didn't I, Max? And he had some tomato sauce left, and I went like this. That's why I came. It's good food at this house. And I also want to thank you, Brian, because I know I've also been kind of, as you said, 12-hour crazy days. But it's over now. But also just check out to the library. We now have a great big screen in our library in Rotorua, and they're really keen to have people's stuff there, whether it's your visual art, whether it's your poetry, whether it's your film. And Sandra does a really good job, so I know I can see, I've got lots of friends in here who are artists, so please go and talk to them. And we thank the clouds, we thank the sky and the earth, and with that we wish you a good journey home. But remember,